Jerome Wilson sat in his penthouse office, scanning the latest reports from one of his luxury hotels. His brand was built on excellence, yet guest complaints were skyrocketing. One report after another described rude front desk staff, deleted reservations, and outright discrimination. A billionaire like him could have dismissed it as an isolated issue, but Jerome knew better. This was a pattern. He ran a tight business, and his standards were non-negotiable. If his managers weren't fixing these problems, he would handle it himself. He decided to go undercover, to walk into his own hotel as an ordinary guest. He wasn't just looking for confirmation, he was looking for proof. And if what he found was as bad as these reports suggested, heads would roll. Using a fake identity, James Wilcox, Jerome booked a room. His plan was simple: experience the treatment firsthand, find the root of the problem, and make an example out of whoever was responsible. With his disguise in place and his reservation confirmed, Jerome was ready. But nothing could prepare him for just how deep the problem ran. The hotel lobby was as grand as Jerome remembered. Polished marble floors, gold-accented chandeliers, and luxurious seating. Yet despite its beauty, something felt off. He approached the front desk where a young woman, Kim, was barely paying attention. She tapped her long nails against the counter, her eyes glued to the computer screen. "Good evening," Jerome said politely. "I have a reservation under James Wilcox." Kim barely glanced at him before typing lazily into the system. After a few seconds, she frowned. No reservation under that name. Jerome was unfazed. He had personally booked the room. "That's impossible. I have a confirmation email." Kim smirked and shook her head. "Sorry, sir. Looks like you don't have a room. We're fully booked." He noticed the way she looked past him, scanning for other guests she deemed more important. It was subtle but telling. The complaints weren't exaggerations. This was a deliberate act. Jerome felt his temper rising, but he kept his composure. "I'd like to speak to the manager," he said, testing how far she would take this. Kim let out a dramatic sigh, crossed her arms, and scoffed. "Manager's busy. You could try another hotel." Jerome took a deep breath. The game had begun. Instead of arguing, Jerome took a seat in the lobby, watching. He wanted to see if this treatment was reserved for him alone. Over the next hour, he witnessed the same pattern. Guests who looked wealthy or important were greeted with smiles. Those who appeared ordinary, or worse, like him, were treated as nuisances. A middle-aged black couple approached the desk, confused about a mix-up with their room. Kim's tone turned immediately cold. "I told you I don't have control over reservations," she snapped. "If you have a problem, call customer service." Minutes later, a well-dressed businessman stepped up. Kim's attitude transformed instantly. "Welcome to Wilson Luxury Hotels. How can I assist you today?" she said with a bright smile. Jerome's hands clenched. This wasn't a bad day for Kim. This was who she was. But she wasn't the only problem. Where was the manager? Why was this happening under his watch? Jerome wasn't done gathering evidence. He needed to see just how deep this issue ran before making his next move. Jerome stayed in the lobby, pretending to scroll through his phone while his mind raced. His instincts had been right. This hotel had a deep-rooted issue. But Kim was just a symptom of a larger problem. A toxic work culture didn't develop overnight. It thrived under neglectful leadership. A tall man in a navy blue suit walked out from a back office. His name tag read Stephen Lane, general manager. Jerome watched as Stephen took a quick glance at the front desk, then walked past without addressing Kim's behavior. Not once did he check in on guests or ensure things were running smoothly. Jerome's jaw tightened. So, Stephen was just letting this happen. He had enough proof to act, but he wanted more. He stood and made his way toward the elevators. If the front desk was this bad, what other issues lurked in the shadows of his hotel? He planned to check the staff behavior across different departments. Housekeeping, room service, security. No stone would be left unturned. If Stephen Lane thought he could get away with running Jerome's hotel into the ground, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Once in his suite, Jerome placed a room service order. Just a simple meal, enough to test the efficiency of the staff. According to hotel policy, orders should arrive within 30 minutes. But an hour passed, and his meal never came. Frustrated but patient, He called the front desk. Unsurprisingly, Kim answered. I ordered room service an hour ago, Jerome said calmly. Is there a delay? Kim sighed loudly. They're probably backed up. Try calling again later. Before he could respond, she hung up. Jerome's patience thinned. He dialed room service directly. This time, a weary-sounding employee answered. Sir, I'm so sorry, the staff member said. We never got your order. The front desk should have sent it to us. So Kim hadn't just dismissed him. She had deliberately ignored his request. Jerome thanked the employee, then leaned back in his chair. This was bigger than one rude receptionist. Employees were either overwhelmed or discouraged from doing their jobs properly. Tomorrow, he would dig deeper. The moment of reckoning was coming. The next morning, Jerome didn't waste time. He spotted Stephen Lane near the breakfast area and approached him casually. Excuse me, Jerome said. Are you the hotel manager? Stephen barely spared him a glance. Yes. Is there an issue? I had some concerns about the service here. Jerome watched Stephen's reaction carefully. Stephen sighed, clearly annoyed. If you have a complaint, you can file it online. Jerome raised an eyebrow. Shouldn't you want to handle guest concerns personally? Sir, we get complaints all the time. I don't have time to deal with every little issue. That was all Jerome needed to hear. This man wasn't just incompetent. He didn't care. Jerome gave him a knowing smile. Don't worry. You'll have time soon. Stephen frowned, but dismissed him, unaware that his time at the hotel was running out. Jerome spent the rest of the morning gathering evidence. Using his private access as the hotel owner, he logged into the system from his laptop and reviewed past guest complaints. His suspicions were confirmed. Kim's name appeared repeatedly in reports of rude behavior, lost reservations, and mishandled requests. One review stood out. The front desk clerk deleted my booking right in front of me and told me the hotel was full. When I insisted, she rolled her eyes and said I could find another place if I didn't like it. That was exactly what had happened to him. Even worse, several complaints mentioned Stephen's lack of action. The manager refused to intervene when I asked for help. Another review read. He just brushed me off and said there was nothing he could do. Jerome leaned back in his chair, his jaw clenched. This wasn't just bad service. It was a deliberate culture of neglect. He had more than enough proof to act. Now, it was time to set the stage for a reckoning. Jerome walked into the lobby with purpose. He had called for a mandatory staff meeting, making it clear that attendance was non-negotiable. Employees gathered, whispering to each other, confused about the sudden announcement. Kim stood near the front desk, arms crossed, while Stephen entered last, looking irritated. This better be important, Stephen muttered. Jerome took a deep breath. It was time to drop the act. I want to address the serious customer service issues in this hotel, he began. I've been here as a guest, and I've personally experienced the kind of treatment guests complain about. Stephen scoffed. With all due respect, sir, who are you to judge our operations? Jerome smiled. I'm glad you asked. He pulled off his glasses and removed his cap, standing tall. Gasps filled the room. Employees exchanged shocked glances. I'm Jerome Wilson, the owner of this hotel. Silence. Then panic. Kim's face paled, and Stephen visibly tensed. The real reckoning was about to begin. Kim opened her mouth, but no words came out. The confidence she had earlier vanished in an instant. Jerome turned to her, his voice calm but firm. You deleted my reservation and dismissed me without a second thought. And you've done the same to countless guests. She stammered. I didn't know who you were. That's the problem, Jerome shot back. You treat people poorly unless they have power. Stephen shifted uncomfortably, but Jerome wasn't done. Kim, your employment here is officially terminated. Effective immediately. A murmur spread through the room. Kim's eyes widened. Please, Mr. Wilson, I need this job. You should have thought of that before disrespecting paying guests. Tears welled in her eyes, but Jerome's decision was final. Security escorted her out as the other employees stood in stunned silence. Stephen swallowed hard. He knew he was next. Jerome turned his attention to the man who had allowed this toxic environment to thrive. Stephen, you've let this hotel fall into disgrace under your leadership. Stephen straightened his tie, trying to keep his composure. "Mr. Wilson, I admit there have been some lapses, but—" Jerome cut him off. "Not lapses. Patterns. You ignored guest complaints, refused to handle issues, and let employees like Kim run unchecked." He gestured toward the staff. "These people look to their manager for guidance, and you failed them." Stephen clenched his fists. "You can't just fire me like this." Jerome smirked. "Actually, I can. And I just did." Stephen's face turned red. Security stepped forward. With no other option, he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. The remaining staff stood frozen. No one had ever seen leadership crumble so fast. Jerome exhaled. Now, the real work could begin. Jerome faced his employees. "This hotel will not be a place of arrogance and mistreatment. From now on, respect and quality service will define our brand." The staff exchanged nervous but hopeful glances. Some looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. Jerome continued, "Effective immediately, we will have a full audit of operations. Those who uphold our values will be rewarded. Those who don't will follow Kim and Stephen out the door." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some employees, who had been mistreated by Kim and ignored by Stephen, stood straighter with newfound confidence. He met their gazes. "This isn't just about business. It's about integrity. And I expect each of you to rise to the occasion." A round of applause broke out. Jerome nodded, satisfied. The change had begun. A week later, the hotel already felt different. Employees were friendlier, guests were happier, and Jerome had implemented new policies to ensure respect was at the core of service. He sat in the lobby, watching as a new front desk clerk assisted a guest with patience and professionalism. His work here was done. As he prepared to leave, an older employee approached him. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. This place already feels better." Jerome smiled. "It's just the beginning." With one last look at the hotel he had saved, he walked out, knowing he had done more than expose corruption. He had set a new standard for the future.